What we're talking about with land development here is going to be when somebody purchases a tract of land, and they're usually buying a very large piece of land, and what they want to do is break it up into individual lots. Specifically today, we're going to be dealing with some residential land development. So we're dealing with a big piece of land that a developer is going to purchase and develop into individual lots. And what we're trying to figure out ultimately, so let's say we're the investor. As an investor, what's the reason why we're going to do any of this stuff here? What's the reason we're going to get into this land development? The reason is profit. So profit is the name of the game when you're an investor, because or return on investment you might want to call it, but ultimately we want to make a profit. We're not here as an investor to take a loss when we're going in spending money and time and effort to try to make something happen. The whole purpose of that is to gain profit. And yeah, there's some side benefits. We create housing, we establish experience, and so on and so forth. But if it wasn't for the profit, this wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be development going on and whatnot. So what we're going to be working with basically is a particular situation. So before we get into the math, let's explain out what this is going to look like. So let's say we buy this big piece of land here. We have this big piece of land, and let's say it's 100 acres of land. Now, can we just go ahead and put lots after lots after lots and just have these all lots back to back? No, absolutely not. We can't have something like this with all this just being lots, because how is the owner here going to access the street that's right here? They're not going to be able to. So that's not necessarily going to work. Now, when you see a neighborhood, it's going to be laid out with streets. And all this planning gets done ahead of time. There's something called the Subdivision Plat Map. And the Subdivision Plat Map is basically the layout of all this stuff that does have to be approved before any sort of development can really begin. So again, let's have our 100 acres of land we're dealing with here. And let's say this is the street. So that's our street, and this is our 100 acres, a little bit disproportional, but you get the idea. So we got to have an entrance. And maybe we have a cul-de-sac. Maybe there's another cul-de-sac over here. You kind of get the idea. Something along the lines of those. And then we'd have our individual lots that are laid out all in here. Here we have some narrow lots that are in here. So as a developer, what we want to find out basically is, as the zoning law requires, because the zoning law has a lot of effect and impact on what this map is ultimately going to look like. But the key thing we need to keep in mind here is we're not using this entire 100 acres for the lots, because the roads, that's not a money-making venture for the investors. When we're talking about building a subdivision, they don't make money off of building the roads. It's what the roads connect to, which is the lots. And that's ultimately what they're selling back to people. So what we need to figure out is how many of these lots we could fit into this neighborhood, and so on and so forth. And in the real world, this does require a lot of engineering on the part of the planners that you're hiring. So whoever it is that's laying out this neighborhood, I mean, you can see me trying to take a stab at this right here. It doesn't look like a very good use of the land, because we had all that land up here that was unused, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and figure a situation. So you can start working with the numbers, because anytime you're trying to understand these concepts, the more you work with the numbers, the better you're going to get at understanding this. Even if this seems very convoluted and very hard to understand right here, as the more you work through this, the better you're going to get at it. So what we need to have to figure out how many lots we could develop, but then there's also a second factor of this, of how much profit can be generated. We need the total size, we need the zoning requirement, and there's a lot of zoning requirements you'll probably have to comply to if you do try to do this in the real world, but as far as exam purposes go, and even in the real world, this is probably the biggest one for this, is going to be what the minimum lot size is. So that's really the main thing we're looking for, the minimum lot size. How big each individual lot can actually be. So we need a zoning requirement. Other things we need to look for is the land for streets. Because we can't develop the entire size of the property, we need to have some room for streets, and then we don't get extra land for the streets. We have the land that we're working with here, and we need to figure out what part of that is used for the streets, and then what's left over to figure out how many lots we could fit in there and still comply with the minimum lot size. So if we have these pieces of information, we're able to figure out how many lots we could actually fit into this piece of property. Let's say we went and bought 100 acres. So we have 100 acres of land, and let's say the zoning requirement in this particular area requires the lots be at least 10,000 square feet. So the minimum zoning requirement, and you'll see this in most incorporated areas, is there's a zoning requirement that says lots can't be any smaller than this certain amount. And they do that to regulate what the neighborhood is like. The whole purpose of zoning, and this goes back to the Industrial Revolution. So there used to be a concept called laissez-faire. And what laissez-faire means is the government's not supposed to be involved with business. So a laissez-faire philosophy of government means that the government doesn't intervene with business. The business does their own thing, they're their own private entity, and the government doesn't control or influence them in any way. Obviously, that's not the case that we have today, but the reason why there's not this laissez-faire for the layout of neighborhoods, why the government is here to tell you how the neighborhood can actually be laid out, is to maintain property values. So before we go any more farther with this math question, let me tell you the history of zoning, because it'll make a little bit more sense this. You understand the why, and the how starts to fall into place a little bit better. So back in Manhattan, and this is during the Industrial Revolution, and if you've read any sort of history books or seen anything on History Channel about the state of Manhattan Island during the Industrial Revolution, it's a garbage pit. It's terrible. You had this huge industrial revolution, and this wasn't just limited to New York City. This was all over the world. This was happening in London and all of these major kind of hubs for commerce during this time of the Industrial Revolution. You had these factories that came in. They figured out the power of a machine, and they were just shoveling coal in, and you had this black plumes of smoke coming out of a property, out of these plants, and so on and so forth. And when I'm describing this, you're maybe visualizing this in your head, and I guarantee you're thinking of it with a gray smog everywhere. So it's very dirty, very nasty. I don't care what time you live in. Even if you don't know anything about what that black smog could maybe do to your health, you probably don't want to live near there. And in Manhattan Island, this wasn't completely overtaken by this, but we had the garment district, and you could still find this garment district today. And it started expanding due to the Industrial Revolution. Companies could now get labor cheaper than they've ever gotten before because they have people operating the machines rather than hand sewing all of the garments and whatnot. So they would have these great big huge factories, and it was very profitable, so they were rapidly expanding. And again, just to go back painting the picture of all this, we had these plants, and there'd be people, the ceilings would be this high, so to walk through you'd be crouching down, and you'd be crouched over on your little table working on everything, and it was, people were stuffed on top of each other. We didn't have labor laws. You had kids in there that were working. And you might have heard this story before, but there's actually a story of one of these plants that caught on fire. And, oh, well, maybe there was fire escapes. Hopefully everybody got out safely. No, there wasn't, because all the doors of the manufacturing plant were actually locked down. The management was sick of people taking breaks. They were sick of people going off and taking breaks, so they said, no more breaks. We're going to lock them all in. We're going to chain them in, and when their shift's up, then we'll go and take the chains off to let them out. So they were literally locked into this plant, into this manufacturing facility, and all crammed in there, dusty, dirty, dark, no way out, and then a fire erupts, and everybody's locked in. There's people that were jumping off from multiple stories up, killing themselves just so they didn't burn to death inside the building. So that's what was going on in this garment district during that time. And now you might also be familiar with the Fifth Avenue district. Fifth Avenue district, today it's a very nice area. And back during the Industrial Revolution, it was still a very nice area. So the Fifth Avenue district, nice area. The garment district, before the Industrial Revolution, they were very spread out because, the people that were the ritzy people in these fancy houses that are worth millions upon millions of dollars today, and were worth that equivalent amount back in those times, they were spread out. But as the garment district began to expand and laissez-faire, they could do whatever they want. The government can't tell them what to do. And now the ritzy owners of these multi-million-dollar properties were like, whoa, we don't want this. We don't want to see people jumping off of a burning building here. We don't want that in our neighborhood. So that's where the people with money went and got some lobbying efforts and went through and got this principle, this philosophy of zoning. But ultimately what it's doing is it's protecting the value of those homes because you don't have these externalities that are lowering the value of our homes. So that's why we have the zoning rules that we have today. And that's why there's a minimum lot requirement. Because if you have a great big lot and there's a little tiny lot in that same neighborhood, that little tiny lot is going to be dragging your value of your property down. If there's multiple tiny lots, then that's going to definitely drag the property value down. So a lot of the zoning, all the zoning rules, the whole purpose of it is to maintain the property values, to give the highest and best use of the property values. And so that's where the local legislators come up with whatever that zoning requirement is going to be. So in this case, for the question, back to the math here, we have 10,000 square feet that we're dealing with. So 10,000 square feet of land, 100 acres of property, and then what we're left with is how much land we have left for the streets. Because again, we can't just have a whole 100 acres with all lots, because if you're fairly good at math, you can see we could fit that in there pretty well, but we still need to have the streets. We need to have the spaces for all these people to access their lots. And so let's say we employ an engineering firm who draws out the subdivision plat map. Or maybe we're just using an estimate that we're just trying to work with the numbers here. On the exam question, it will give you this information, but let's say the land that we need to use for streets is, let's say, about 50,000 square feet. So we have 100 acres, 10,000 square feet, and 50,000 square feet of land. Now the question is, how many lots? How many lots can we fit in these 100 acres when each lot can't be any smaller than 10,000 square feet and where we have 50,000 square feet of streets and open spaces? So stick with us. We'll come back from this commercial break. We'll go ahead and solve this math problem.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. Need help preparing for your exam? We've got you covered. Join us for a structured weekend review class where we'll cover the topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams. Class sizes are limited, so reserve your seat now by calling 813-928-0106 or registering online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Have you been thinking about starting a real estate career but are struggling to find the time to go back to school? Allow us to introduce our revolutionary online course platform. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we have used our years of education experience and student feedback to bring you the finest and best online course. Visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106. That's 813-928-0106 to learn more and register for our online course today. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to Ask the Instructor. Today, we're talking about land development. And before we went on break, we're talking about this scenario where we have 100 acres of land. We have 10,000 square feet per lot, and we have 50,000 square feet that we need for roads. Now, the question is, how many lots can we fit in here? So what we need to do, again, let's visualize this. So we have our 100 acres here. We have our 100 acres. We have the space that's available for the streets. So let's say we just have the one street going in here. Now this area for the street, that's not going to be accounted for the areas that we can put lots in. We can't put lots where the street is. The street is separate. So we need to take the lot size, or the street size out of this entire 100 acres before we could figure out how many of the lots we could fit in this 100 acres. So to put the math with that, what we're going to do is take our total 100 acres and take out 50,000 square feet of land. But as you can see here, we're in different units. We have 100 acres and now we have square feet. So what you want to remember is how many square feet there are in an acre, which is 43,560. We have 43,560 square feet in one single acre. We have 100 acres, so we're going to multiply that by 100, add 2 zeros at the end, and what do we have here? 4,356,000 square feet. So this 100 acres is 4,356,000 square feet. And that was just taking our 100 acres and multiplying it by 43,560. So that's our total size, our total 4,356,000 square feet. What we have to do now is take out our streets. So we take our 4,356,000 total square feet, we subtract out the 50,000 square feet for our street, and we should be left with $4,306,000 square feet. We're not in dollars yet. We are going to get to dollars later, but right now we're still just figuring out how many lots we could fit in here. So our total was 4,356,000 square feet, but we had 50,000 square feet for our streets. So what we're left with to actually develop into lots is 4,306,000 square feet. Now each lot has to be at least 10,000 square feet in size, and as a developer, and maybe we'll have some that are slightly larger and whatnot, but we want to ultimately figure out, if we use the minimum lot size, how many lots can we really squeeze out of this 100 acres. So all we're going to do in this case is take it and divide it by 100, or 10,000. 10,000 square feet. So we have 10,000 square feet per lot required, and we have 4,306,000 square feet. We want to figure out how many lots can fit in here, so we're just doing a simple division. And we put that in our calculator. We have 4,306,000,000 divided by 10,000 gives us 430.6. So we could put 430.6 lots in our neighborhood. Now, be careful here, because normal rounding rules would tell you to round where? It would tell you to round up in this case. We would take our 430.6 and round it up to 430.1. You don't want to round up. Why do we not round up here? Because if 0.6, that's not a whole 10,000 square feet. That's only 6,000 square feet. We can't have a 6,000 square foot lot. It violates the zoning requirement. So if this was even 0.9, if it was 0.99999, it would be 9,999 square feet, which doesn't hit that 10,000 square foot threshold. It wouldn't comply with zoning. We wouldn't be allowed to use it. So with this, we always have to round down, because we can't have a fraction of a lot. We can't have a fraction of a lot. Any fraction of this minimum requirement doesn't meet the minimum requirement, so we don't have 430.6 lots, we have 430 lots. You always drop off the decimals. No rounding whatsoever when you're figuring out how many lots you could fit, because otherwise we'll be violating the zoning requirement for the minimum lot size. So we have 430 lots we could fit in this neighborhood. So now let's switch gears. So we just figured out how many lots can go into the neighborhood. Now, as a developer, remember back from the beginning of the episode, what I was asking, what does the developer want? The developer wants profit. Yeah, the 430 lots, that's all fine and dandy, and let's write that number down before we forget. So we have 430 lots that we could fit into the property. And that's fine and dandy, but the investor, the developer, is going to be asking, all right, well, how much money am I going to make on this? So now we're switching gears into figuring out what this is going to cost the developer, and that's usually information that may be given to you. But then on top of that, we have to go ahead and figure out how we factor in their return on investment, figure in their profit, and figure out what we need to sell each lot for. Because what we need to do is take, okay, the investor wants, let's say the investor wants a profit of 10%. So the investor wants to get a 10% profit on this 430 lots. So in order to figure out what profit, we need to figure out the lot cost. Or lot price, I should say, since we're going and reselling them. That's what we're trying to find out, is how much this investor should price these lots at to get a 10% profit. Well, in order to figure out the profit, we need to figure out the cost. So let's say that the developer paid $3 a square foot. So the developer paid $3 a square foot for this land. So we have to remember how many square foot we had in the last situation, which was 4,356,000 square feet. So there's our total square foot, and it was $3 per square foot to buy this property. The developer wants a 10% profit, but there's one other thing we need to factor in here. It's going to cost some money to level the land. Maybe this land is covered with trees, and let's say that there's going to be a cost of 2 times the land cost for development. So far for our cost, we have the $3 per square foot, and then whatever that number comes out to, it's going to cost twice that much to develop the land, to clear the trees, to get all the land leveled, to lay the streets, to get everything ready so we could take these lots and go to a consumer and say, hey, look, here's this lot ready for your house. Maybe we even have model homes that are set up in the neighborhood or something like that, but we need to have everything ready. We can't just have this whole forest, basically, and say, yeah, we bought this and we're selling lots in here. We don't have a street to get to the lot, but we've accounted for that, and there's space to leave a street. We just haven't put it there. That's not going to work. The consumer's like, all right, well, I need a place that has a street to get to my lot, so we need to pay for this development before we even factor in what the profit's going to be. So the question is, we're looking for the lot price. The developer wants a 10% profit, and that 10% profit is going to be based on our cost. These right here are the cost. We have the cost for the land and the cost for our development. So let's figure that first. Then we'll worry about the profit stuff later. Let's figure out at least how much this is going to cost us to get into this property or into this development. So we have $3 a square foot, and we have 4,356,000 square feet. What we're going to do basically is multiply the two of these together. And when we multiply the $3 a square foot by $4,356,000, what we're going to end up with $13,068,000. So our land cost is $13,068,000. So it's costing us just a little over $13 million just for the land. But following through with all this here, we have to factor in now our cost for development. And the cost for development is going to be twice that. And now you want to be careful with here, because the way this reads, the development is 2 times the land cost, 2 times the land cost for development. That doesn't mean we just double this and we have our total. It basically means that we double this and that's how much it costs for development, but we still need to add back in our original land cost. Because we have how much it's going to cost us to develop it, but that's not factoring in the land. This is just for development. So 2 times the land cost for development. So we're going to take our land cost of $13,068,000, and we're going to go ahead and multiply that by 2 and add it back in. Now you might be saying, oh, can we just multiply it by 3? Absolutely. You want to just multiply it by 3, we're going to get the same exact answer. So let's actually do that, because that's going to save us a little bit of time here. So what we're doing is our 2 times the land cost plus our land cost. So we're not multiplying it just by 2, we're multiplying it by 3, because we want 1, 2, 3. Now we have the 2 right here, and then that's our third $13 million. So we need to know what this is, $13,068,000 times 3. So our total development cost is going to be $39,204,000. Pretty expensive development so far. Now let's figure out, it must be in a high demand area for this type of situation. Now we need to figure out how much profit. Don't jump right into figuring how much each one of these lots cost. I mean, you don't necessarily need to figure that out. Yes, we could do it that way, but as an investor, you usually don't want to figure out the lot cost until you're like, okay, well, what do I need to sell the lots for? You could do the math to figure out how much the lot cost us, but we want to know what the lot price is ultimately. So what we need to do now is factor in our investors' 10% profit. So what we're going to do is multiply this by 0.10 to get 10% of that, and then we're going to add that back in. Now, another way you could do this, again, to save you a little bit of work with the arithmetic here, is rather than just multiplying it by 0.10, we're going to multiply it by 1.10. And that 1 we're adding in is keeping this in here. So when we multiply by 1.10, it's going to give our total that we need to recoup, that we need to sell everything for, factoring in this original $39,204,000. So we're going to, again, pull out our calculator, $39,204,000 times 1.10. That's going to be our total price with that 10% factored in, and we end up with $43,124,400. So when it's all said and done, we need to sell all the lots for a total combined amount of $43,124,400 for these 430 lots. These are going to be some expensive lots that we have here. But anyway, so that's our total cost. We sell 430 lots. That's the number we need to be at. Our developer will get a 10% profit. We'll cover our land costs. We'll cover our development cost. And everything all checks out. So let's go ahead and free up some space here. So we've figured out our total cost now. Our cost plus 10% profit. And that was $43,124,400. So we have our $43 million that we need to cover up with these 430 lots. Now it's just going to be some real simple math. We're just going to take this $43,124,400 and divide this by 430 lots. So we're going to take out our handy dandy calculator again, divide by 430 lots, and each lot would have to sell for $100,289, and it's 0.302, but at this point we can actually do some rounding because we're dealing with dollars and cents here. Remember, we couldn't round before because we were dealing with number of lots to comply with the zoning. So when this is all said and done, we have $100,289.30 that we need to sell each lot for. If we could sell each lot for that amount and not a penny more, then we're going to be able to get our full return on investment plus a 10% profit. We're going to get all of our costs covered plus the 10% profit that the developer was looking for in this situation. So stick with us. We're going to come back and do another one of these problems here and go a little bit deeper into this here just to make sure. And again with this, if you feel overwhelmed at this point, this is where the repetition comes in. You do repetition, you go through this multiple times, and you don't even have to memorize the formula because you'll just remember the steps in solving the problem. Yes, there is an ultimate formula that would probably be this long if I wrote it all out for figuring this, but when you understand what we're doing and you know what the steps are, that's a lot easier to remember than remembering the formula. That's what we're here to do, make it easy for you, so stick with us. We'll be right back after this short break.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. Need help preparing for your exam? We've got you covered. Join us for a structured weekend review class where we'll cover the topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams. Class sizes are limited, so reserve your seat now by calling 813-928-0106 or registering online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Have you been thinking about starting a real estate career but are struggling to find the time to go back to school? Allow us to introduce our revolutionary online course platform. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we have used our years of education experience and student feedback to bring you the finest and best online course. Visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106. That's 813-928-0106 to learn more and register for our online course today. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm Jon Carissimo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We do this to help our students, as well as anyone else that's watching this, understand these real estate topics that we go over. And this week we're talking about land development. Now, specifically with land development, what we're referring to here is taking that big piece of land that we're buying, breaking it up, figuring out how much we need to sell each one of these lots for. So we're dealing with this in a residential situation. So let's go ahead and try another one of these here. So what we're going to do is we have a land that we're purchasing. So our land is half of a section. So we're purchasing half of a section. Our cost for the land is, let's say, $2 a square feet. So we have $2 a square foot for the land cost. Our development cost is, let's say again, 2 times the land. So it's going to cost us $2 a square feet for the land, and then the development cost alone is going to cost twice of whatever that land total comes out to be. Our zoning requirement is, let's say in this case, 12,000 square feet. Our street requirement, let's say in this case we have a larger neighborhood here, so let's say it's going to be 400,000 square feet. And now the last thing we need is the developer's profit, and that's the big thing. They're like, okay, I want say a 12% return on investment. So we have a half a section of land. It costs us $2 a square foot for that half a section. The development costs are twice that land amount. The zoning specifies we need at least 12,000 square feet. The street requirement is 400,000 square feet. The investor wants a 12% return on investment. So what we need to figure out now is our minimum lot cost. Since we're dealing with minimum square feet, we need the minimum lot cost in order to cover everything. If we sell every lot for this minimum lot cost, we're going to actually end up making our 12% profit. So first things first, let's figure out how big half of a section is. A standard section, this is something you want to remember for your exam, is 640 acres. 640 acres for a standard section. We divide that by 2 for our half, and we end up with 320 acres. So we have 320 acres, and the price is $2 a square foot, but here's our difference. It's not $2 an acre, it's $2 a square feet. So what we need to do is take this $2 a square foot and multiply it by the number of square feet here. But first and foremost, we need to find the number of square feet. So we're going to take our 320 acres and multiply it by 43,560, which with our handy-dandy calculator here, 43,560 times 320 gives us $13,939,200. So now we're almost $14 million for a cost of our land. The development cost is going to be twice that. So let's take our $13,939,200. Actually, no, that was just the square footage. We're not even there yet. So this is where writing down your work will definitely help you out with this, because this is not the price. We haven't factored in the price yet. This is just our square foot. Now, to factor in our price, we have to go and take this number and multiply it by 2. So we're taking our number of square feet and multiplying that by the $2 a square foot. And if you're writing all the signs in the units, like I wasn't, if I was writing that in, I would have caught all this. So it's definitely recommended. Show all the work. Just don't do basic scratch work like I'm doing here, or was doing before I labeled those out. So we're going to take our 13,939,200 square feet, multiply that by $2 a square foot, and we end up with $27,878,400. Now we have dollars. So that is the total cost of our land. $27,878,400. Now our development cost is twice the land amount, so we're going to have to take this and multiply it by 3 to account for the 1, 2, 3. 2 times for the land development, 1 time for the land to find our total cost. So we're going to take that and multiply by 3. And we have $83,635,200 being our total cost. So almost $84 million it's costing us for this half a section of land that's at $2 a square foot. Now we have everything except for our profit factored into the cost here. So we also need to factor in our 12% profit. In order to do that, we're going to multiply this by 1.12. That's our 12%, plus also adding that in to save us a step of math. So times 1.12. And we get $93,671,424. And this is how much we need to sell all of the lots that are going to fit in this property. Now notice we haven't figured out the number of lots yet. Now this is a different order than we did in the previous problem, and that's absolutely okay if you want to do it in this fashion. Let's free up a little bit of space here. We'll get rid of all these numbers since we have that figured out. And if you guys are following along solving these math questions with us, you could always go back and rewind all this stuff here. So if I were in class and in front of people, they'd be, oh, don't erase that yet, but we can go ahead and erase this now. So we're done with all of our cost for all of this land. We've got that all figured out here. But now what we're left with is figuring out how many lots we could fit in this property. And I probably shouldn't have erased our square footage, which was 13,939,200 square feet. So that's how many square feet of property we have here. Now we need 400,000 square feet of roads and open spaces and so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and subtract out this 400,000. So 400,000 square feet, when we take that out of here, we should end up with 13,539,200 square feet. Double check my math. Should be all right. Last thing we need to do here is now just divide this by our 12,000 square feet. And what we're going to get is how many lots we could fit into the allowed space for lots. So what we need to do now is take our 13,539,200 square feet, divide that by 12,000, and we end up with 1,128.2666667 lots. Now, can we have 0.2666667 of a lot? Absolutely not. That's not a full lot. It'll violate the 12,000 square feet minimum lot requirement. So we just have 1,128 lots we can develop. Now the last thing we need to do to figure out what ultimately our cost per lot is, because we have the total amount we need to sell all 1,128 lots for, so we're just going to divide this 93,671,424 by the 1,128 lots, and we're going to end up with $83,042 and about 4 cents. So if we sell each of these 1,128 lots for $83,042.04, we will end up not only covering our cost, the $2 a square foot for the land, but also covering our double development cost. Developing the land costs double what that land is. And this is all information that's given in the question. I could have put 3 times in there and it would have been the same thing you would have solved. You just would have did 3 times the land cost instead of just 2 times the land cost. Then we had to factor in our 12% profit. And then once we had all that, then all we had to do was just go ahead and divide this out by our number of lots we had, which was 1128. The total square footage minus our square footage for the streets, divided by 12,000 for the minimum lot requirement. And we need to sell each lot for $83,042.04. So I know that's a lot to really kind of follow and a lot to kind of put together with this here. And it is quite a bit of stuff, but I mean, if you're developing a piece of land, this is the math you need to do before you even think of whether or not this is going to be plausible, whether or not this is going to be viable. And now you're going to have to play with these maths a little bit too to say, hey, maybe I can't do $2 a square foot, maybe I do $1.80 a square foot because maybe I can't sell lots for $83,000 in this market. If you can't sell lots for $83,000 in the particular market you're dealing with, that's where you have to go back and renegotiate the deal because that $2 a square foot wouldn't work. And we could do this on a lot smaller scale as well. So let's say we're buying just 1 acre of property. So we have 1 acre of property, which is 43,560 square feet. And the minimum lot requirement is, let's say, 10,000 square feet. Now going through this, let's say this again is a real world question that we're looking at here, not necessarily one for an exam. Looking at these numbers, 10,000 could go into 43,560 about 4 times. And we do 43,560 divided by 10,000. We end up with 4.356. We can't have 0.356 of a lot, so we have 4 lots to develop. So we could develop 4 lots. Now, can we just develop 4 lots in this situation without factoring out any room for streets? We might be able to if there's a street here and a street here. And our lot that we're buying touches both of these streets. Because what we could do is split this up into quarters. We have lot number 1, lot number 2, lot number 3, and lot number 4. And we could split this all up like this. And each one has access to the street. So we wouldn't have to make any green spaces or anything like that. Again, we're dealing with a lot smaller piece of property here. It's just 1 acre worth of land. So we could split it up this way and everything would meet that minimum lot requirement of 10,000 square feet. So let's say we're just going to go with these 4 lots that we're going to build here. And let's say, again, that our cost per square foot of the lot is, let's say $2.50 a lot, or square foot, not a lot. So our land cost is $2.50 per square foot of land. We have 43,560 square feet total, because we're just dealing with 1 acre here. We're going to multiply that by $2.50. Again, don't drop your signs out here, so we take our 43,560 square feet, we multiply that by $2.50 per square feet, and we end up with a dollar cost of this land of $108,900. So this land costs $108,900. And you might be saying, oh, John, well, what about land development cost? Well, it depends. If we're dealing in a smaller scale right here, there may not be much land development cost. Maybe we might have to pay some legal fees to subdivide this and some other things like that. So let's factor in something because there's probably going to be some sort of cost. So let's say it's going to be about, we'll say $20,000 in development cost. And if you are doing this in the real world, of course, you want to double check that stuff and just not go off of this. This is just very early type of calculations that you're doing to figure out if this is even viable for you to maybe look at this land, but then you want to go back and double check all these figures to see if it is going to actually cost you $20,000 to develop this land. But if that were the case, it'd be $128,900. So we have $128,900. Now the question is, what do we need to sell each of these 4 lots for? We take this $128,900, we divide it out by our 4 lots, and we're going to end up getting $32,225 per lot. So if we sold each of these 4 lots for $32,225, we'd break even. Now we don't want to break even because we haven't factored in profit at all. So now we could go ahead and factor in, let's say maybe and you can see we're doing these in a different order than what we were doing earlier. Now, when you're practicing these on your own, I don't recommend doing these in a different order because you're just going to confuse yourself. You will never remember the steps that you need to do in order to solve the question. So I don't recommend you doing them in different orders like I'm doing here, but I'm just doing this to explain to you the different ways there are to solve this problem. There's a lot of different ways to work with these numbers with the math, and they're all correct ways. So what we could do here, we have our cost per lot, but now we need to figure out what we need to sell it for, and let's say we want to make a 20% profit, so we're going to go ahead and multiply this by 1.20. So $32,225 times 1.20 gives us $38,670. And now this might not be the price that you want to sell it for, but maybe your absolute minimum. Because at a minimum, maybe you wanted the 20% return on investment on this property. So at a minimum, then, you need to sell it for $38,670. So maybe you sell it for $40,000. Is that a bad thing? No, that's a good thing. You're getting almost another $2,000, another $1,400, $1,300 or so of extra profit that you had. So you're getting above a 20% return on your investment at that point. So that's land development. And in the real world, there's a lot more calculations than this. There's a lot more in depth that you have to go into this to figure out all these numbers and make sure all these numbers are checking out. But this is a good kind of theoretical way to look at these situations. And even if you are thinking about developing some land, you start off looking at it and looking what the minimum lot requirement is for the minimum size. And you can figure out how many lots could fit in this neighborhood. And then once you know how many lots could fit, and you can figure out what the cost is, and once you factor in your profit and the development cost, what that lot cost is going to be, $38,000, this sounds a lot more doable than $80,000, than $100,000. The 2 previous questions we came up with, it was $100,000 per lot for the first one, and I think it was $84,000 for that second lot. Those are pricey lots. Usually the building makes up most of the value on a piece of land, not the land itself. So this is a lot more competitively priced. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do these great big lots in order to break even. I mean, you'd probably only get maybe a 1 or 2% profit if you're in those big situations we were talking about before, because you probably could, if there's lots selling for $38,000 and you're trying to sell it for $100,000 and you're in the same area and there's nothing that makes your area any better, principal of substitution is going to apply, and people are just going to go substitute your lot for this lot right here. Maybe they have to pay a little bit more to get a builder that's building independently on this one lot instead of your mass production building that's going on in your particular development. But if they could get this land for $38,000 versus $100,000, that's a big cost savings right there. So even if this is a smaller scale, we're only doing with 1 acre instead of 100 acres or instead of 320 acres, this math still all works. It'll work for any size property. And even these principles and these concepts, even if we're not talking about residential, it could be for commercial, it could be for an office park, it could be for all kinds of different types of properties. This is the very fundamentals of figuring out a profit based on how many lots you want to put in there. Maybe there isn't even a minimum lot requirement, but there's at least some minimum size. You can't give everybody a 1 square foot lot and expect them to pay top dollar for that. There's a certain point where they're going to want to pay a certain dollar amount for this. So these are some really good fundamentals if you're ever dealing with developers, if you're dealing with investors, to really understand this, to understand capitalization rate, to understand return on investment, to understand all these different facts and figures, because that's going to make you better equipped. And when you have investor clients, those are repeat business for you. Repeat business that you don't have to go out and prospect for every day. The average homeowner buys and sells a home every 5 to 7 years. Investors, they're probably buying 5 to 7 homes, if not more, a year. So completely different scenario here. And what they want somebody who's knowledgeable, who they could trust, who's honest with them, who knows how to figure this stuff out. Because that's a value to them. Even if they know how to figure all this stuff out, they probably don't have time or don't want to go through and do all these calculations over and over and over for property. But there's an opportunity for you to make money off of that. So that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Ask the Instructor on Land Development. Can't wait to see you guys next week for next episode of Ask the Instructor. If you guys are trying to study for your exam or anything like that, go back through and watch our other videos that we have. We have tons of videos just like this, going through solving this, explaining what it means to really help you remember this and get a better understanding so you can pass your exam the first time. And hey, even if you're not doing this to practice your exam and you just want to learn more information about real estate, maybe you're thinking about investing or thinking about getting a real estate license, go through and check those other videos as well, because there's a lot of great information that isn't just useful for the exam, it's useful in the real world as well. Everything you have to know for the exam is used in the real world, so there's nothing for just the exam and so on and so forth. So I'm Jon Carissimo. Make sure you tune in next week, next Wednesday, 12 noon. We'll have another episode of Ask the Instructor, and also on every Friday at 12 noon. So this Friday, in 2 days from now, we'll have State of Real Estate. And State of Real Estate, that's a great show because this is where we go through and actually mastermind. Here we're talking about how to calculate things, how to figure stuff out, and how to understand the real estate industry in the technical standpoint. On State of Real Estate, we're going through and talking about the current real estate market, the current real estate trends, and how you can capitalize on that to grow and jumpstart your business. So I look forward to seeing you guys this Friday at 12 noon, right here on YouTube, right here on Facebook, right here on tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success, our success center. You can find all these videos. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. Need help preparing for your exam? We've got you covered. Join us for a structured weekend review class where we'll cover the topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams. Class sizes are limited, so reserve your seat now by calling 813-928-0106 or registering online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Have you been thinking about starting a real estate career but are struggling to find the time to go back to school? Allow us to introduce our revolutionary online course platform. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we have used our years of education experience and student feedback to bring you the finest and best online course. Visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106, that's 813-928-0106 to learn more and register for our online course today. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching.